What constitutes legitimate functions of power that A, addresses the legitimate concerns of group one about a fear of tyranny, addresses the concerns of group two about not being able to achieve anything, and the real threat that we face right now, and then falls into that third category that, again, maybe I'm setting it up to benefit my own category, but
it is your show.
Hey, yeah. And I would say, I'm going to give some examples. I already gave one. I think it was perfectly legitimate for Donald Trump to blow up that boat in the Caribbean that was carrying drugs to the United States. I have no problem with Donald Trump saying, I'm going to use the military. We have the greatest, strongest military in the world. The left's always complaining about how much money we spend on it. Well, instead of spending on it and creating a bunch of foreign wars where we try to set up liberal democracies in Afghanistan, I'm going to use it to protect the American people from both governments and cartels and terrorist organizations that are engaging in some of the worst behaviors possible. And again, not just with narcotics. If you want to know in part why we have this huge human trafficking problem, look no further than the cartels. So I think it's perfectly fine for him to flex U.S. military power in order to go after those organizations. I'll give you another one. And this is one where I don't think Donald Trump is going far enough. And I don't think Republicans in Congress are going far enough. I am sick and tired of my tax dollars going to educational institutions that teach my kid to hate me, hate their country, hate God, and to revere nothing but leftism. Why are we subsidizing this to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every single year? Why? Well, Nick, you don't support education? No, I don't support indoctrination. And that's clearly what's going on in these institutions. Here's my question, and I've asked this before. If higher ed, if the University of Virginia is going to come to me and say, Nick, we're absolutely essential. Don't you want the Commonwealth of Virginia to have a robust, award-winning university system? My answer is, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But if the only way you're telling me you can achieve that is not by convincing my constituents to give you money in the form of tuition, but instead convincing me to steal it from my constituents to give it to you so that you can then have an entire studies department where you get to push Marxism on a kid that showed up for an engineering degree because you loaded up in their mandatory classes that have nothing to do with their major. No, you can fund that you can fund that yourself. You don't get a dime of my taxpayers' money. I really want to see this administration go after higher ed like they've never gone after them before. I want to see state legislatures say, you know what? You keep telling us how essential you are. Well, if you're really essential, then do us a favor. Convince the people to voluntarily give you their money. You no longer get to count on us to just give it to you. I want to see them go after higher ed like that big time. I want to see again, same thing with public schooling. I love it when public schools say that if they have school choice, that will steal money from public schools. What do you mean? Wait a second. You mean I'm going to tax people ostensibly to pay for a robust education system? But if I gave a portion of that money back to the parent to be able to choose what school they went to, it would steal money from you? Well, the money's already been, quote, stolen in the form of taxation. Why are you so afraid? Because understand something. If I give the money back to the parent and they can spend it on whatever school they want, they could spend it on your public school. Why are you so afraid they won't go back to you if they had an option? Oh, I know exactly why. If the only way your school can exist is if the law requires people to send you their children, you suck as a school. You suck as a school. You should be able to make a good enough argument to those parents that we are doing a great job educating your child. And if you can't do that, then yes, that parent should be able to take the money associated with their child's education somewhere else. I don't think there's anything wrong with that theory on funding education. There are some people who go even farther and say the government should just not be involved in education at all. Okay, but I'm saying that right now, why shouldn't the dollars follow the students to where the parents want them to go? Another thing that I would say,
I agree with all that.
Well, I'm going to give another example of what I think we should be doing with legitimate government power right now. Trump took over law enforcement in D.C. And what did he demonstrate? He demonstrated that in a relatively short period of time, a major metropolitan city can be safe, can be clean, can be a place you can bring your family to without being worried of being mugged, can be a place you live where your kids can get to school without being constantly threatened with gang violence. And then as soon as he talked about doing it in Chicago, and I will acknowledge that there is a constitutional question on whether or not he can do that. Can you really use the Insurrection Act simply because of a high crime rate? That does set a precedent. That does set a precedent that I don't know that I'm totally comfortable with. But what did the left do? And this is an important factor here. What did the left do? They immediately said, well, if you really want to go after, why are you going after all these blue states? Why don't you go after the crime in red states? And Trump looked back at him and said, excellent idea. Let's start with Memphis. And the governor of Tennessee was like, cool. Well, now all of a sudden, the constitutional question that you might have had about going into a state that didn't want you there, into a city that didn't want you there, well, now all of a sudden, it's very, very different when you have a state that's asking for it. Can you imagine what would happen if they actually sent the National Guard into Memphis and they cleaned up Memphis in a relatively short period of time?
I think we're about to find out.
Well, and that's the part where I say, look, if you would have just sent it into Chicago, I would have understood it, but I would have had some concerns. But when you send it into Memphis, I'm like, this is actually a great example of what happens when we apply the conservative theory toward criminal justice versus the leftist theory toward criminal justice. And we actually have the ability to show a distinction, a major distinction in the way that conservatives handle crime in a major city versus the way the left does. And so that's the sort of thing where I look at it and I'm like, look, guys, I understand all the concerns, but that's worth a try. That's worth a try.
Right. There's kind of a gray area. And Christian mapped out, he was talking about constitutionally where they're able to get away with this, which I think there's enough gray area to say, yeah, we might not have used it in this way before, but it probably can be used in that way. Just like blowing up those, drug boats. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that there is an element of let's go ahead and test and find the boundaries of where the Constitution lets us go and just push it all the way to the edge until the Supreme Court says, okay, that's far enough. I mean, just take it as far as you can. That's what they've done. That's what they did during COVID. That's what they do with gun laws. They do it all the time until the Supreme Court says, boom, there's the stopping point.
And then they put people in the courts who then said, oh, yeah, you can keep doing it.
Yeah. But I think that,
which, by the way, we can do the same thing.
Well, I think
I'm just pointing that out. We can do the same thing.
Some great examples, too, that I would love to see happen is, again, I want to see a massive reduction in the size of the federal government. I loved it when Trump was given furloughs because we don't need a federal bureaucracy this big. We don't need as many federal departments as we have.